Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Matthew, I'm the school counsellor, and today I've been asked to put together a video talking about how you as parents can support your children with their transitions into their new year levels, whether they're starting school for the first time as a prep or moving into a higher year level. Change is challenging no matter who we are or how old we happen to be. Status quo bias makes us comfortable with where we are currently, even if where we are isn't enjoyable. This is certainly something that we've all learned over 2020 and 2021, where despite being in less than ideal circumstances, many people found themselves dreading going back to work or school. Children are no different, and while transitioning into a new year level can be exciting, it often brings with it certain anxieties and stresses. Thankfully, these concerns are able to be addressed, and I encourage you to begin to use some of the strategies we'll discuss today before your children start school, to help to smooth their transition and make their re-entry into school in 2022 a much easier process. First, let's quickly clarify what transition means. Anytime your child switches interactions between parents and educators, or moves from place to place, or changes from one activity to another, this is transition. This definition is very broad and therefore includes both minor transitions that occur day to day, as well as major transitions that occur much more infrequently. While the difference between the two might be significant, the way transition can be addressed and smoothed over is the same. The obvious transition that we'll be focusing on today is the transition out of school holidays and back into the school term. Let's first talk about transitioning between home and school. This is perhaps the most important transition of all, and the walls between the two were broken down across 2020 and 2021. Children and parents can both experience anxiety around the transition between home and school, and the most common way that this anxiety presents itself is as separation anxiety, where a child doesn't want to be separated from a parent, but also at times where a parent does not want to be separated from their child. In fact, in many circumstances, a child not wishing to be separated from their parent is triggered by the parent not wanting to be separated from the child in the first place. Children, as we've said many times before, observe their parents like it's their job. If you are anxious about separation, it's almost guaranteed that your children will be anxious about separation as well. The easiest method to address this, which can be done in advance before school resumes, is to practice separation. If a child fears separation from their mother, maybe dad can take them out for the afternoon when mum isn't around. If a child fears separation from both parents, well, maybe a play date can be organised with a friend in the week leading up to school returning, where the child will be left in the care of another adult while mum and dad are absent. The important factor here is exposure to situations where separation occurs, but it's still a positive experience overall. This exposure allows children and parents to realize that separation is okay, and prepares positive expectations for the return to school. The second type of transition that's important to discuss is the transition of routines. Parents will often, rightly so, allow their children more freedom and flexibility over the holidays when it comes to their routines. The difficulty arises when this flexibility continues right up until the day children return to school, when the expectation is that they will suddenly fall into their school routines. Bedtimes, screen time allowance, even diet and eating times are all important routines that we can't expect our children to simply change overnight. Doing so will likely lead to resistance from children, acting out, and perhaps worse still, resentment towards their schooling. Thankfully, this type of transition is easy to address. Simply introduce some school routines in the week leading up to returning to school. Maybe it starts simple, with lunch and dinner times returning to be in sync with school times. And by the few days before school resumes, their bedtime, screen time, and overall free time is better adjusted to reflect what they'll have access to during the school term. Ultimately, this slow, steady transition is healthier for children, and indeed for all humans, regardless of age. This is because sudden change causes humans stress, which leads me nicely into my next point of discussion. Transition causes stress for humans, no matter how big or small. Note that I said causes stress, rather than it being stressful. Some stress is perfectly okay for humans to experience, and indeed can lead to greater productivity. It's when we have too much stress that the issues start to arise. Children who have sustained high levels of stress are less able to learn, and if the stress continues forward, they can have their development affected. It's essential that we as adults understand the significant damaging effect that stress has on children's health, behaviour, and learning. Also, hand in hand, it's equally important to understand the significant benefit that having a calm, relaxed environment and mental state can have for children. Continued emotional distress can negatively affect a child's intellectual abilities, which in turn affects their ability to learn. In addition to this ongoing stress, distress caused by poorly managed transitional events can be a very disturbing experience for children, often burned into their memories for life. How many of you as adults can remember a traumatic experience you had as a child? To complicate things further, children all react differently to stress. What causes one significant distress might be handled in stride by another. What might cause one to panic might cause another to thrive. The short answer here is that you need to know your child. We as school staff, both educators and support, spend a great deal of effort getting to know your child so that we know how best to support them. Use your own knowledge of your child to your advantage. If you know your child is likely to experience anxiety from separation, don't leave it and see how things go. If you know your child is worried about their new teacher, address their concerns now, before it becomes a bigger problem. If you aren't sure what your child needs, speak with them. However, how you speak with your child is incredibly important, and learning what questions to ask can be the difference between knowing what to do to help and enabling a situation that will make their stress worse. Parents will often ask children how they're feeling or how their day's gone and whether they've had a good day. These are examples of questions that are either too open-ended or too closed for appropriate discussion. Unless your child is particularly excellent at discussing their thoughts and feelings, you're likely to get closed answers to these questions that don't tell the whole story. Instead, ask focused questions like, what do you think about your teacher next year? Or, what can you do to make friends this year? Instead of asking how school was, ask, what was your favourite thing you did at school today? Why? These questions are open enough to get your children to think, but focused enough that your children won't be overwhelmed with possible options for their answer, and just default to, it was good, as an answer. Equally as important is how you talk about the matters you want to bring up with your children. I feel like it doesn't need to be said that it's important to not talk about things negatively. If your child picks up that you are worried about them going to school, or anything for that matter, then they're likely to be worried too. If you speak about things negatively, they'll pick up on that. However, your children aren't silly, especially if they're older. Sometimes making things overly positive is unnecessary and can instead make a big deal about something that isn't needed. Going to school is something your children will be doing for many, many days to come. Make it normal by speaking about it as though it is normal, like having dinner or going to the shops. It's just another thing we're doing. By speaking in this way, children assume that going back to school is neither here nor there and are more likely to transition smoothly. By allowing things to be neutral, it helps our children to stay calm about their transition, rather than it being a bigger deal than it has to be. Overall, if you prep their transition before school returns and are on the lookout for things that are stressing your children, then managing their return to school will be infinitely easier for you. If your children are stressed, put steps in place to manage it, rather than just seeing how things go. If you aren't sure what you can do, reach out to the school. I guarantee we've seen it before. That's all from me today. I look forward to seeing everyone on site. Good luck, and I'll see you next time.